Welcome to today's partner education event. This is a special community experience for our HBCU partners. I am so excited to start the first in our three-part series today. We have a really great conversation planned for today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few logistical notes as we get started here. This webinar is being recorded and we will send you the recording as well as some additional educational resources in a follow-up email after this event. You can also always find the recordings of our partner education webinars, this event, and all of our education opportunities in our Partner Knowledge Center, which is help.mentorcollective.org. On the screen, you'll see a few tips to help ensure a smooth virtual experience for you today. You can adjust your video layout to speaker view, which allows you to see the slide deck and also toggle back and forth between the deck and our presenter faces. So if you'd like to see us, our faces, we'd love to see you. You're able to toggle back and forth, but you can also go back to the deck if you would like to. We'd love to know where you're coming from, where you're joining from. So share your name, your institution in the chat if you feel comfortable. Feel free to drop your LinkedIn as well if you're open to connecting with others in the group today. We'd love to see where everyone's calling in from. My name is Jennifer Caius, and I am Mentor Collective's Customer Education Manager. I create education opportunities that support strong mentorships at your institutions. And I'll be hosting today's session, and I'll introduce our incredible guest speaker, Dr. Levon Esters, in just 1 second. As we're going through the event today, please use the chat feature to ask your questions. You can use just the chat feature to toggle to message anyone in the group here. We want this to be an interactive experience for everyone. We want you to join the conversation. So I also encourage you to use the reactions feature throughout the session to keep things fun. We love those emoji reactions. It keeps things fun. Again, it's a Friday. Let's make it fun. So use those emojis if you like what you hear throughout the session. All right, so our guest speaker for today, we are so grateful to have Dr. Levon T. Esters here with us today as our guest. Dr. Esters serves as Vice Provost for Graduate Education and Dean of the Jeffrey and Fox Graduate School at Penn State University. Dr. Esters is a nationally recognized scholar on mentoring, equity, and diversity in STEM-based agricultural and life sciences disciplines. His research focuses on the mentoring needs of Black graduate students, the STEM career development of students attending HBCUs, and the educational and professional mobility and development of grad students. He is also an adjunct professor in the School of Integrative Plant Science at Cornell and a senior research associate at the Rucker Center for Minority Serving Institutions. And prior to joining Penn State, he served as associate dean for DE&I and faculty affairs at Purdue's Polytechnic Institute. Dr. Esters earned a BS in agricultural business from Florida A&M, an MS in agricultural education from North Carolina A&T State, and a PhD in agricultural and extension education from Penn State. And he's also the co-author of the book HBCU, The Power of Historically Black Colleges and Universities, which is absolutely fantastic. I have a copy right here. I'm going to plug it the whole time. Oop. I don't know if you can see it through the screen, but it's a fantastic book. And we are just so grateful to have you, Dr. Esters, here today to talk about your background, your experience. And I'd love for you to kick us off with more of an introduction to your own journey with HBCUs and with mentorship.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jess, also for helping out today. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm looking in the chat as I'm gazing to my right, and I see some of the folks who have put in the chat the institutions they represent. So I see Coppin State representing. I see Central State in Ohio. I'm familiar with them. I've worked with them before. And Clark, Atlanta. So thank you for being here. So as was mentioned, my name is Levon Esters. Currently the Vice Provost for Graduate Education, Dean of the J. Jeffrey and Emory Fox Graduate School. I've been here now, it'll be 2 years this May. Prior to this, I was at Purdue for 15 years in that Associate Dean role that Jennifer shared with you. And then prior to that, I was at Iowa State University for 5 years. And so I actually earned my PhD from Penn State. So I never thought, I like to tell the story, I never thought that 20 years later, if you will, that I'd be I would be back here at Penn State in this role, in leading the school, if you will, or college that I graduated from. But I had a great experience at Penn State as a doctoral student, and so for me, which I'll get into just a little bit later, once Jennifer and I start to engage in an interview, I believe wholeheartedly in giving back. And so for me, I look at my role as a leader, but just even how I mentor students to just give back, to pay it forward, because I always tell folks that I wouldn't be sitting here in this chair or in this position for that matter if folks didn't pour into me. And so what better way to help others achieve their goals and to reach, we reach whatever goals they want to reach by pouring into them. And so I kind of treated, I think I told Jennifer this when we had our conversation a month or so ago. I kind of give my wisdom and knowledge and experience. I pay it forward just like if I was a philanthropist. So uh, being so that's how I treat that experience and giving back. I think another thing I would like to share, and if you decide to purchase the book, I'm not trying to plug it necessarily, but it is a great book. We'll get into it in a little bit. Um, I'm a two-time HBCU alum. I earned my bachelor's degree from Florida A&M University, FAMU, and my master's degree from North Carolina A&T State University. So uh, a lot of who I am and my identity was cultivated on the campus of two HBCUs. I'm originally from Chicago, from the south side of Chicago. And so, and we'll get into it a little bit later. Maybe I can weave it in some other way, shape, or form, how I came to want to pursue my undergraduate degree at a HBCU. But nonetheless, a lot of who I am was cultivated on those campuses. And since I graduated, even when I was in my master's degree program and when I left and pursued my PhD, I've always been engaged with HBCU. So I've been engaged. So not only my two-time alum, but in terms of the work that I've done over my entire career, I've always connected with and given back and worked with HBCU. So it's something that I've never lost sight of since I graduated from FAMU 20 years ago. So 30 years ago now is what it is. And so I just thought I'd put that out there. And for that matter, even the work that I did as a researcher at Iowa State, but really when I was at Purdue University, for that 15 years I was there, um, I would say probably 80% of my graduate students at Purdue were from HBCUs. A majority were women, but a lot were from HBCUs. And so for me, I didn't just walk into this space, right? I'm a product. I continue to do the work, and even here in this role at the Fox Graduate School, I still carry that forward. So I just want to. Hopefully that's enough, Jennifer. I just at least want to
Yeah.
let folks know a little bit about my background and how this came to be. That I just didn't wake up one day and say, "I want to do this work." I've been committed to it for a number of years. So I'll stop there and turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thank you for that. And again, that's that's why we're so grateful for you to be here and share your perspective, your experience, and your wisdom with us. Let's start with talking more about your experience specifically around mentorship. So, in your book, HBCU: The Power of Historically Black Colleges and Universities, you talk about the importance of mentorship from several individuals, including Don Million Patton, who's a professor of agriculture, I believe at Southern University and A&M College. I'd
Yeah,
love for you to talk more about the work or about the impact of that mentorship and
yeah,
others on your career.
yeah. I appreciate that. So yeah, so huge shout out to Dr. Patton, Dr. Melian Patton. She was, I think she retired maybe a couple years ago, but at the time we wrote the book, when I mentioned her name, she was still working at Southern University. But so, as I mentioned a little bit ago, I'm from Chicago. So when I graduated from undergrad from FAMU, I went back to Chicago. I worked for a year in an assistant management trainees program. I did that for a year. I really didn't like the work, and so my dad, who was a professor, he's passed away, but he was a professor, psychology professor, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to be an academic. And we had a conversation about next steps after this job, and I decided to, I had an interest in teaching, and so long story short, I taught at the largest urban agricultural high school in the United States called you can look it up, the Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences. It's on the southwest side of Chicago. It's an urban ag program. And because my undergraduate degree is in agricultural business. So we had this school in my backyard. So I went up there and talked to some folks, and it just so happened that the gentleman who was the coordinator for the ag business career pathway was leaving to start a similar school in Indianapolis. And so they were like, whoa, you got this guy coming in, we're losing a teacher. Would you have an interest in taking on this role? So I did this role. And at the same time, I started to pursue my teaching credentials through one of the city colleges of Chicago. And this is the school, if you look it up, it's well known. It has a strong history, phenomenal graduates. It actually the first African American president, national president of the National FFA organization, was from that high school, Corey Flournoy. And so school is steeped in history, and so lots of connections. And so just so happened, I was going on a college tour when I was at this school, and we visited the likes of Alcorn State and Prairie View and the AU Center, and so on and so forth. And one of our stops was at Southern University in Baton Rouge, and I happened to meet Dr. Melian, and I shared with her, I had an interest in pursuing a master's degree, and she had gotten her master's from A&T, North Carolina A&T. She said, "Listen, if you're interested in a master's degree, you should think long and hard about A&T." And I was like, "Oh, I never thought about getting my master's at an HBCU." So we had a conversation, and she gave me the information, contact information of this professor, Dr. Kerry Ford, I believe was his name, and I reached out to him. We went back and forth, and he says, "Well, listen, if you're interested, apply." So I applied to A&T. I taught at high school for about 3 years, and I left and started to pursue my graduate degree at A&T. And so Dr. Melian, Jennifer, to your point, was very instrumental in giving me advice, sharing about her experience at A&T. She said, "Listen, Levon, if you go to A&T, they're going to nurture you, they're going to pour into you just like they poured into your FAMU. You're in good hands." And I trusted her. She was a phenomenal Black woman. I trusted her, and that, Jennifer, was my graduate career, if you will, started at A&T. And so I owe a lot, and which is why I shouted her out and mentioned her name in the book, because I owe a lot to her and her advice and her mentorship, to your question. And so Jennifer, she played a significant role in really talking me through that experience and what I would learn. And I don't regret for one moment going to A&T. Now, I tell people, you cut my arm, I bleed orange and green, FAMU, right? But the other arm, if you cut that, I bleed blue and gold for A&T. But I love my time at A&T. I had a great experience engaging in leadership roles, and I mean, you name it. And so a lot of who I am today, Jennifer, was a byproduct of my experience at A&T.
That's fantastic. Dr. Esters, I so appreciate you sharing that. I think we often talk about mentorship in the context of maybe very young students, and not as often about how important it is on graduate students and even career professionals in shaping the trajectory of truly their entire life, right? So
Right.
I appreciate you sharing that and helping us understand that the importance of mentorship at that stage.
Yeah, and I think, Jennifer, the one thing I would add, I'll make sure I give your question its full recognition, is that, so for me, and we'll get into this a little bit later with some of the other questions, but I had great role models when I was at FAMU, who poured into me, as I said. That continued when I was at A&T. And so for me, how I look at mentorship, mentoring students, especially graduate students, I learned from those who mentored me when I was at FAMU and A&T. So my journey into this whole world of mentoring and mentorship, if you will, was cultivated at an HBCU, and which is why I love those institutions, which is why I still work with them even today on February 28th. I have not lost the fervor for doing that work, and so I learned a lot from those who mentored me when I was at those institutions, and that carried me through when I was at Iowa State, Purdue, and even here at Penn State, Jennifer.
That's fantastic. That's a perfect segue. Let's transition to talk a little bit more about how attending an HBCU may have contributed to your sense of Black identity. Could you talk more about that, especially in the context of how identity conscious mentorship can support
Yeah.
personal and professional growth?
Yeah. So if I may take a step back, I'll get you a question. I'm going to take you around the barn,
Yeah.
as they say, or the block if you're from the city. Whichever one, it doesn't matter. But anyhow, um, so some people often ask me, Jennifer, well, Levon, how did you find your way from Chicago to an HBCU? So a little bit of background. So I grew up, and a lot of my friends went to Illinois State, Southern Illinois, Northern, Western, all the directional schools, if you will, in the state of Illinois. I had no interest in going to stay in Illinois, none whatsoever. I wanted to get out of Chicago, pursue, just explore the world. And when I was in high school, there were a lot of teachers that went to Prairie View, Morehouse, Spelman, Alcorn State, and so I had that influence. There weren't a lot of people in my neighborhood that went to HBCUs, but I grew up without dating myself. I grew up, Jennifer, when the Cosby Show was on TV, A Different World. But one of my favorite movie of all time, School Days. So, folks, if you haven't seen it, which I imagine many of you have, if you haven't seen it, you should stream it. It's a classic movie. And when I saw Jennifer's School Days, I was like, wow, like I want to go to an HBCU. I mean, just to see, to your question, Jennifer, the blackness, how the identities were developed, the culture. I could not believe what I was seeing on the screen. Now, mind you, I went to a K through 8 school that was all black. I went to a very good high school, one of the top high schools in the city, a public high school in Chicago, 95% black. So I was around, the culture, if you will. But for me to see it on the big screen and to see from, from athletics, with football in particular in this movie, and the sororities and fraternities, and just how people just came together. And then so for me, that was where it started. And what I will also say, Jennifer, when I was at FAMU was, you know, yeah, I was fortunate to travel. My parents were both college educated. As I mentioned, my dad had a PhD, and so I got a chance to go around, travel the country, and those sorts of things. And so I was exposed to a lot. But not until I got to FAMU did I start to meet black folks from Portland, Oregon, and from Kansas City, and from LA, Los Angeles, and Seattle, and Jamaica, and Bahamas. We were all in this one space. And so you get to learn and have conversations. And I was like, wow, I mean, this is amazing. And so you really learned about what it meant to be a black person in this institution, but you had different backgrounds. And so for me, who I am as a person, and we share this in the book, right, in one of our chapters, that identity is cultivated in college. Number one, we all know that.
Yeah.
But specifically, going to an HBCU, you really learn about what it means to be a black person in America, and that not all black people are monolith. We're all different. And so, again, that was just further ingrained in my system as a college student, because when I was in K through 8, I went to a um, elementary and middle school. It was K through 8. We call them grammar schools in Chicago. Went to a grammar school, and we every morning we sung the lift every voice and sing every morning. I mean, so I went to that type of school, that type of environment. My dad was a black. He studied or taught courses in black psychology. So I grew up in a household. I knew what it meant to be a black person. So that was part of my DNA. But again, being able to, Jennifer, to go to pursue my undergraduate degree, to go to college, and to really be immersed in it for those 4 or 5 years I was there, that meant a lot to me, and it really it really formed who I am today.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so critical what you're talking about there and the impact of diversity and on student success and how students can learn from the lived experience of others, regardless if they have the opportunity to travel or not, right? That's incredible. That's a perfect segue into our next theme here to talk more about mentorship and student success. So your research in the book there was some of this, and your professional background. Your research highlights the role of mentorship in student outcomes, and
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk more about how mentorship at HBCUs empowers students to succeed academically and professionally.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, let's see, I think the best way to respond to this question is to talk about my experience as an advisor, a mentor
Mhm.
to my graduate students when I was at Purdue. So when I was at Iowa State, I just started my academic career as an assistant professor. So I didn't have a lot. I didn't have a large. I had a couple of grad students over the years when I was at Iowa State, but then I left there after 5 years and went to Purdue. And then so I had a couple of grad students early in my career at Purdue, uh, but the turning point for me was the first. I had a black woman who's now she's phenomenal. She's now associate vice president for student affairs at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Brittany Brown, phenomenal woman. Went to UAPB, and she was my first student, black student at Purdue. And from that point, um, that's how I had started to have this reputation uh, for recruiting black graduate students, and so it just took off when I was at Purdue. I mean, we were not just productive for 10 years; we were just rolling. I mean, we were productive. I mean, we just did a lot over those 15 years I was there, but it was a 10-year stretch where we were just on fire. And but so for me, I took it as a personal responsibility to make sure I mentored all my students, no matter the color or background. Make sure that I poured into them because they deserve that if they were going to study with me. But for me, and I'm going around a little bit, but I'm going to get to your question. I think the other thing I would add, Jennifer, to your question that you didn't ask about is so, I was at Iowa State, I was at Purdue, two predominantly white institutions, and there weren't a lot of black faculty members at Purdue. And I always tell folks this story that for me, even though I was in an academic department, I was the only African American professor. Uh, what in part, what sustained me and what kept me at Purdue was the fact that I had a lot of black graduate students. Because every day I can come to work, Jennifer, and see someone that looked like me every
Mhm.
day. And we could talk about everything from academics to hip hop to bands. I mean, you name it, we could talk about it, right? We had that shared identity, that shared understanding, and that was sustaining. And so, I mean, because every day I could look forward to that, right? If I wanted to see someone that looked like me, and the same thing was for them too. They felt the same way. And I had,
Empowering, right? It's an
yeah,
it's
oh,
it,
very, very, very much so, very much so. We actually wrote a piece about that. We did a conference paper about that phenomenon, if you will. But for me, there's something to that, and so for me, being able to pour into my students because we had the shared understanding identity, which was even though because I had students from UAPB, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Virginia State, Prairie View A&M, Southern University in Baton Rouge, FAMU, A&T. So we got it. We got each other. We understood it. And so I knew what they needed. I knew what they needed specifically because of their background and them being in this predominantly white space. And so uh, every one of my students graduated, no matter what culture identity they had attached to them. Everyone graduated when I was at Iowa State, but more specifically at Purdue. But again, for me, uh, a lot of what I learned from being poured into when I was a student at FAMU and A&T, I more or less replicated that when I was at Purdue University, with some refinements, of course, right? With some refinements, but we built something when I was at Purdue. We built something, and I think another thing that occurred was I didn't have to work to recruit students because starting with Brittany, when we would have visitors, students who wanted to come make visits and were thinking about coming to Purdue, my the students in my lab, they sold the program for them. They said, listen, if you come work with Dr. E, they call me Dr. E. If you come to work with Dr. E, you're good. He's going to take care of you. You're going to graduate. You're going to get a lot of experiences. You're probably going to shoot eye daggers at him because he's giving too much to you. But nonetheless, you're going to get A plus mentorship, advising, so on and so forth. And so I didn't have to do a lot of work to recruit students, but we had a machine. We were rolling for years. We were rolling. So that may be a long response to your question, but that's kind of how it came to be when I was at Purdue.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect response. It's really the anecdote, right? You're like you lived it. Like you're saying, this type of mentorship is empowering students to obviously to succeed academically. They're all graduating, right? And then professionally, they're taking that next step into their career and they're landing in really fantastic places as you followed Brittany's career and your other students as well. It's
Yeah, yeah,
fantastic.
I enjoyed it. I, I just love graduate education, which is why go figure. I'm in this role now, and I tell people, yeah, I have a lot of meetings with this job. We're going through a lot now in higher ed, but just in the U.S. in general, in the U.S. overall, but in higher ed. But this job is easy in that, Jennifer, I come to work every day knowing I need to focus on one thing, and that is how do I best support students.
Mm.
So, right now we're going through a lot, right? Unionization efforts, we got just DEI being attacked. But at the end of the day, when I drive down Fox Hollow Road, which is the main road I drive to work, I focus on one thing, and that's what keeps me sane. That's what allows me to do the work, and yeah, so it's been working out extremely well, to say the least.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder, right? It's bringing up the next generation, making sure that the future is has the best leg to stand on. That's a great way to segue into this next question here. So, what are some ways you think that HBCUs can strengthen peer mentorship programs at their own institutions to improve student success?
Yeah, well, first of all, I could go through the list. Let me pull it up. I can go through the list of folks, Jennifer, who on this call who represent, as I said, Clark and Central State and Coppin State and so on and so A&T, Aggie Pride. Um, so they're doing all the right things,
Mhm.
right? My interest in working with some of those institutions that I just named, who represent our friends. I like to call folks friends when we're in these spaces. Who represent our friends is because one, I'm a product, and two, I just enjoy visiting the campuses. Matter of fact, my middle daughter, I have three. One is actually getting her MBA here, graduates in May, and my
Oh,
middle one's at Fisk
congrats.
right now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my middle one's at Fisk. She's a volleyball player at Fisk, and I didn't force her to go to HBCU. That was just what fit her style. My oldest went to Indiana University in Bloomington, so that was her cup of tea. My youngest one's a 16-year-old sophomore high school softball player. So, but she wants to play softball for a D1 school. So they all have their own lanes. But for me, um, uh, when it comes to peer, mentoring programs in general, but even peer mentorship programs, HBCUs are doing a lot of the good work, right? They're doing the right things. I think if I was to get some advice, is right the way you build good programs, good quality programs, is to find out what the students need. So ask them, right? What do you need? What's missing? What are the gaps? That's what I found in the MAP program that we built at Purdue was one. It was coordinated by students. I set the vision, but the students did the work, if you will. But a lot of how we built the program and those aspects of it, those elements, were grounded in talking to students, right? Trying to find out what it is they needed, um, and how can we best support them so that they can earn their degrees. And so in the work that I've done with Central State and A&T, let's see. So another thing I would mention, so there are 19, Jennifer, 1890 institutions or Black land grants. So for example, you have the white land grants or the likes of Purdue and Penn State. They were created in 1862, founded in 1862. Then you have the Black land grants that were founded in 1890. So they had 19 1890. Central State is one of those. A shout out to Central State. And when I was at Purdue, we partnered with 16 or 17 of the 19 1890. So I visited them. I worked with colleagues there. I mean, and I love visiting those institutions. So in the work that we did through the MAP program at Purdue, when we made those visits and we were trying to recruit students and engagement projects, uh, we spent time on those campuses, Jennifer. We didn't just go in and try to take. We spent time. We ate, broke bread. We listened. We reciprocated, and that is so they poured into us and our efforts, but at the same time, we did the same thing for them. And so, but what was key to those relationships, Jennifer, is that we listened, we talked to the students, and the advice that I would give to your question to those on this call and others is that's what you need to do. You need to take a step back. You pick up these skills right in kindergarten. Listen, sit and listen, ask questions, show some humility,
Mhm.
and that's how you build quality programs. So that's what I would offer up.
It's refreshing to hear you say that. I think so often we get bogged down with more I don't want to say more strategic, but more tangible
Yeah,
do this and this will happen, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it really boils down to listening, to building those relationships, whether it's
yeah,
participant centered, you're focusing on the students. That's a great way to build an institution-wide culture of mentorship, right? Or to collaborate with others across the country. So listening, sitting in, building those relationships, collaborating, giving what you take. What can I give to build your program? What can I take to make mine more impactful? It's so simple, but it's something we often miss, right? And the conversation gets lost. So I really appreciate you bringing that back to the table.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah. Like I said, it's we did some great work, and our partners. Again, a lot of the graduate students that came to Purdue and the College of Ag, because that's my tenure home, came from A&T, but they earned masters and PhDs, and they came from A&T. They came from Southern. They came from Maryland Eastern Shore. I mean, so uh, like I said, we were on a stretch run at Purdue where man, we were rolling, we were rocking and rolling, and I miss that work, right? I mean, I'm in this role serving in other ways, but I enjoyed those experiences, and so I thought I'd offer that up too.
So we have some folks in the room and also some folks that I know will be listening to the recording of this.
Yeah,
And they don't necessarily work at HBCUs, but they work at schools where they lead other identity conscious
yeah,
initiatives. An example of that, I think in the chat, I saw one of our partners. Roosevelt, perhaps from City University of New York, who leads the Black Male Initiative. So I'm interested in your thoughts on how can institutions outside of the HBCU network
yeah.
apply these lessons to better support Black students and other students from other underrepresented groups.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before I respond, and I know you said this at the outset, but please, everyone, if you have questions, commit them to memory, place them in the chat so we can have a conversation. So please do that. So to your question, Jennifer, so my advice. So let me illustrate, and let me answer a question through an illustration. So you mentioned my background, this appointment I have at Cornell. So 3 years ago, maybe, some folks at Cornell reached out to me, similar to how you did, based on the work, and they wanted to partner with me to create something uh, that was built, where mentorship was foundational to the program, that served as a pipeline, getting students to Cornell or for a master's degree, what to help them earn a graduate degree, but to get this experience that would later catapult them to earning a master's or PhD. And so you can look this all of the programs stopped for a reason prematurely, but even if it was still going on, it probably wouldn't be because it was funded through USA. We all know how
Mhm.
that ended up. But anyhow, it was called the Thomas Wyatt Turner Fellowship Program. It was named after the first African American who earned a PhD in botany. Dollar
Oh,
grant from USA. Can you still hear me?
it just dropped out for 1 second. If
Uh,
you could just
can
repeat
you
what you
hear me?
just said quick.
Can you hear me?
Yep, yep, you're all set.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Yeah, let me know if I don't know what's going on. Let me know if you can't hear me. Um, so it was created through a $750,000 grant through USA, and I was the director of the program, and we created this program for the purpose of we focus on students at MSIs, so HSIs, Hispanic Serving Institutions, HBCUs, and what we wanted to do was to bring them to Cornell for a year-long experience. They would take courses, they would take colloquium, all those sorts of things. And then and these were mostly all master students. And after they completed that 1 year-long experience, they would go back to the HBCUs, continue uh, complete their master's program. And these students came from Delaware State, A&T, Tuskegee, Virginia State, Maryland Eastern Shore. I think I said Tennessee State, one or two others. I can't recall right now. But anyhow, there were, I think, 8 students in this cohort. I believe 7, Jennifer, of the 8 are in PhD programs now.
Oh, wow.
So it was a highly effective program. But to your question, and which is the advice I'm offering up to those who don't work at who may work at a non-HBCU, the foundational principles that we use to create this program, I more or less took from how we built the MAP program at Purdue. Same elements, right? But one of the main strands in this program was that of mentorship. So we made sure students receive quality mentoring from their PIs at Cornell. We provided education or training, as folks like to say, to the mentors, but also to the students. I engaged with them and gave them advice, and we had conversations. I went to visit. Cornell's only 3 hours up the road, so I spent time on Cornell's campus. But we wanted to make sure that, let alone Purdue or Penn State, but going to an Ivy League like Cornell can be intimidating to
Hmm.
students. But all these students could do the work, and they are successful now. And so the advice I would say simply is that, when you think about building a program, um, focus on, you know, there are certain things you need to focus on. So, right, you need to provide students with quality mentoring. You need to provide students with um, making sure that students get access, that the access they are provided is on par with the students that attend the institution.
Hmm.
So they weren't getting anything less than a normal Cornell student. That wasn't going to happen on my watch whatsoever. Um, and so we made sure of that. And we also had mentors that were committed to the work, that believed in equity work, that believed in diversity and inclusion work, but more importantly, believed in student success. And so I made sure that we stuck to those principles, and we built the program accordingly. But uh, a lot of what went into building the program, again, we spent time with not only the students and asking them what were their needs, but we also spent time with those students' advisors back at their HBCUs. So it was a reciprocal relationship, um, and we were successful. I mean, it was sad that the program ended, uh, and again, it actually ended before this whole fiasco with USA. But I guess that was a blessing in disguise, because we all know where USA is today, and it was a DEI focused effort. So the chance that program's still thriving was probably zero. So, but I believe wholeheartedly in we made an impact. We did what we set out to do, and we were at the right place at the right time. So, but back to your question, that's how we built the program, with those foundational elements of success, mentoring, um, uh, nurturing, all those things that I learned and that I received when I was at FAMU and A&T.
Let's transition now to talk a little bit more about strategically supporting mentorship initiatives, and actually going off what we just touched on there with USAID funding, right? So
Yeah.
funding is a critical challenge for I mean, for all of our institutions, including our HBCUs, and it's something very relevant in the minds of institution leaders, given the recent executive orders. How can industry partners and alumni networks work together? How can we collaborate to provide more sustainable support for these institutions, specifically keeping in mind graduate students? You know, those students might be more connected to some of our alumni networks and industry partners.
Yeah. Well, so let's dive into this. So we all know where we are right now in terms of a country, but more specifically as we drill down in terms of where we are in higher ed. Uh, we're very familiar and well aware of the attacks on DEI. A lot of those executive orders are being challenged in the courts, and so we have to see how that plays out. And I know each institution, even those represented here today, they operate differently, Penn State included. But what I will say is that, and I said this yesterday, I'll come back around to your question too. We had a program yesterday for fellowships for students, and at the end of the day, this event was a day long event. I said to students, I said, listen, I know we have a lot. There's a lot going on around us, but I said, let me say this to you. Each of you came here to earn a degree. That's what you need to focus on. Do the work. Focus on getting the degree. Myself as the lead as the dean of the graduate school, Fox, and my colleagues, other leaders, we're going to take care of everything else that's swirling around you. So I know your mind's probably going to drift over those lanes, but just know you came here for a purpose, and that is to earn a degree. So focus on that. Now, I would say the same thing in terms of supporting and finding funding for these programs. Until we get, and until it is stated unequivocally that there is no funding to fund X, Y, and Z, continue to submit those proposals, continue to collaborate with in development work, right? Fundraising. You can still work with business industry, philanthropists, those sorts of things. So there are a lot of ways, foundations that you can pursue to fund your work and support the work that you want to do. But in terms of funding related to NSF and USDA, you know, there's still a window. The windows are still open to do this work. Now, the other thing that you can do is to identify partners in this work, right? Whether it be other MSIs, whether it be PWIs like Penn State, Purdue, you name the institution. There are still ways to do the work creatively, and so I would encourage you to do that. So I don't think all is lost yet. I'm going to remain hopeful. We as a people have all struggled with these sorts of things before. We'll get through it. Um, but I think that there's still ways to support students, Jennifer. There's still ways to pursue the mission of our institutions. There's still ways to create to scale. You can create programs. Maybe you scale the program down a little bit, Jennifer. Right? So a lot of ways you can engage. You can engage, Jennifer, with community organizations. So there are a lot of ways that we can pursue this work to support students to ensure that they're successful. Um, we may not have the optimal levels of funding that we want or that we wish for, but that doesn't mean we should stop the work, right? So we are all talented, all those on this call today, and just you and you, Jennifer, as well. So that's what I would offer up. I think that there are ways to do some things. As a matter of fact, if any of you on this call want to partner with me here at Penn State, let me know. I'm always game to do that as well. So that's what I would offer up.
It's That's just so wonderful. I'm listening to you say all this, and I'm just thinking, I mean, I wish I could take all that. I mean, I might take that and put it on a post-it note and just remind myself of it, right? It's just such a good reminder to stay focused, stay student focused, and to support each other and doing the work that we do every day. So I can't thank you enough for that perspective. So speaking of community, let's talk a little bit more about mentorship and community here. So mentorship is obviously not just about professional growth. It fosters a sense of belonging, a sense of community. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how HBCUs and their partners can create mentorship networks that extend beyond graduation, right? So I heard you talk about some of your former students, that you followed them into their careers. I love hearing that. Yeah, talk more about mentorship that continues long after the program ends.
Yeah, um, great question. So, one, I encourage my students to pay it forward and to build, right? And they do that, whether it be Brittany at John Hopkins, whether it be Zach who's at Purdue now, Brandon's still at Purdue, Cornell is at Purdue, Victoria. So I have actually four students of mine that work at Purdue that still engage in this work. I have students in other spaces. Quincy's at Oregon State University. So they are building out their own networks and communities because I would like to think that I showcased to them. I was an example of how you do this work. So that's one way to build networks. Another way, not to be cheesy, but to work with the Mentor Collective. How about that? That's the way to do it, right?
Didn't plan that answer, but
No,
I,
I know. Yeah, everyone. But that wasn't staged. Just so you know, it wasn't staged. Yeah. I don't work like that. We don't do that. We don't do that. But it was just came to mind. So that's how it came out. But no, I believe that with all sincerity, that folks like the Mentor Collective, they do great work. But I mean, there are a lot of folks, Jennifer, that want to engage in this type of work. And you know, I mean, I'm engaged in conversations on LinkedIn, and communities are built through LinkedIn, as you know, Jennifer, and people purchase our book and they have conversations. I'm going to give a talk at Roosevelt University in Chicago in August to faculty staff. I mean, so that's how you do it. You get out there, you share the great work you're doing, the impacts that you're making, and for me, I may not have the bandwidth to engage and have a lot of projects, but I don't mind sharing my expertise, as I stated at the beginning. As I stated at the beginning, that's one way I can give back and build community. But um, I still stay connected with my students. We still work together. We collaborate on things, whether it be in op-eds and projects and those sorts of things. So, Jeff, at the end of the day, listen, I love it. I mean, you can tell. You and I have talked. I love this work. Um, and I'm just blessed to be able to be in this position. People often ask me, Jennifer, what I like most about being in this role. You can't see it, everyone, but I have a picture of my when I won this Mentor of the Year award. I have a picture of students in my grad lab on the wall over here. One, I like the picture, but two, it's a constant reminder to me of why I do this work, right? And in that, I think at the height of my lab, I had maybe 8 to 10 students. But now I'm over 13,000 students at Penn State. So I can make a much larger impact on these students through my work in this role. And so as long as I'm in this role, I'm going to pay it forward. I'm going to you know, if I had a meeting after this call right now from a student from, I'll just pick chemistry, and they say, hey, Dean Esters, can you give me some advice? I'm going to give that student the same exact advice that I would have given to Brittany. I'm not going to water it down. I'm not going to be stingy with it. That's not how you do folks. You don't do folks like that. Why should I hold back from this student from chemistry? You don't do that. I'm going to give to that student from chemistry as if he or she was my student. And if you keep that in mind, that's how you build community, to be honest, because you reach one, Jennifer, you reach many. That's how I believe. I believe that. You reach one, you reach many, because that student, when he leaves or she leaves, they're gonna say, man, I met with Dean Esters. Let me tell you what he said. And then it just spirals, it just snowballs. So build community in essence by staying engaged with the folks, by having conversations, by sharing your expertise, and let the magic work itself.
This is so inspiring. I mean, I'm thinking of that in my own life, right? I'm thinking
Yeah,
about how I can build community, and I'll just take this presentation today to heart. I really will. I hope all of us do here, and just the importance of community building and thinking of ways to engage and collaborate beyond just the confines or the barriers of your program, right? Just thinking, how can we make each other better long term? I
yeah,
love it.
yeah, yeah.
So, last question here as we're heading to the top of the hour. Looking ahead, what's your vision for the future of mentorship at HBCUs? It's a big question to end
Yeah.
on here, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love for you to talk more about how do we ensure mentorship remains a pillar of support in the
Yeah.
future.
Well, I mean, I think I don't think it's going away because HBCUs have been around for years, right? We've endured a lot from underfunding to just attacks on the work that we do. We'll make it through this moment in time, and uh, there will always be folks that want to work in HBCU because they want to give back to their communities. They want to give back not just to their identity-led communities, but even just uh, the communities where those schools and institutions are located. So I think they will continue to thrive. I mean, there's so many leaders that have, from Kamala Harris to Stacey Abrams to uh, Keisha Knight Pullum. I mean, there's so many leaders, Ibram Kendi, that have graduated from HBCUs that are building, that are leading, that are just doing all sorts of things. And so there would never be a shortage of supply of great leaders at HBCUs. Um, so we're going to be good. And I think that my vision is that we just continue to do what we can to do the best work that we can, to recruit the best students we can, and to pour into them so that when they graduate, they can go on and continue the cycle.
Mhm.
And that's why you have institutions like A&T and Clark and Coppin State and others on its Central State that are still thriving as of today. And so, every time I get a chance to visit a new city, uh, if I'm near an HBCU, I like to go visit and just walk the campus. I mean, just to see the students, the energy. HBC, they serve a purpose. So, and we talk about that in the book. And I would say, I would encourage you all to get the book, whether you want to read the book. But I will also say I want to give a shout out, Jennifer, if I may, that there's an audio version, excuse me, of the book on Audible. And we actually, my Mary Beth Gassman, Dr. Gassman, and I actually had an opportunity to choose the narrator. It's a black woman. Her voice is like heaven. Like, I'm not saying it just to plug the book. I mean, you listen for yourself. It's a sample online, but her voice is like heaven. But you will learn a lot from each of those chapters in that book, and because we talk about what it means, what these institutions mean, what they have meant from history even to today. So that's what I would say. I would end with that. That's my vision for those institutions.
Dr. Esters, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your perspective. This has been fantastic, inspiring. It's a great way to go into the weekend. I tell you what, I'm feeling really good. I hope everyone in here feels that way as well. Let's quickly talk about what's next before we wrap up. That book that we keep talking about. I'll drop that link in the chat. It's here we go. Let me grab that and pop that in the chat. Uh, Truly fantastic. It showcases the role HBCUs play in empowering Black students, and I just can't recommend it enough. We also have some other upcoming virtual events here at Mentor Collective, including our Ask the Expert series, which is a small group session where we talk about data and how data could make an impact at your institution. We have our in-house data expert that helps with that. I also want to give a shout out for the next event in this series, this three-part series. On March 19th, we will be talking more about the value of mentorship. We have our 2024 National Association of Colleges and Employers Mentor of the Year winner, Philip Wilkerson, and we'll talk more about how mentorship addresses systemic barriers, supports first-gen students, provides professional pathways for through HBCU alumni networks. And as a reminder, if you are able to attend all three events in this series, there's another one in April. You'll receive a special thank you gift of your choice, and one of those thank you gifts is actually the book. So make sure that you register for that. My colleague Jess, Director of Partner Success, who I neglected to introduce earlier, thank you, Jess, has dropped the links for those events in the chat as well. So as we wrap up here, I have a quick poll, just a feedback poll to see how y'all felt about today. And as I'm launching that, Dr. Esters, I just want to thank you again for your time and for the valuable conversation today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, Jennifer. I want to thank you, number one, for reaching out. I enjoy. I mean, you could tell by my energy, and you've seen it before today that I enjoy these conversations. And thank you, Jess, for being here, and thank you for everyone who was on this call today. As I said a little bit ago, listen, we're going through some tough times, but we will make it out. And if any of you on here ever want to engage with me, I put my LinkedIn in the chat. Reach out to me at any point in time. You're not bothered. It's not a bother whatsoever. But keep doing the work and keep your heads up is what I would say.
Thank you. All right. Well, folks, thank you for your time. The recording of this will end up in your inbox as always. And I hope I can see all of you again in March. And Dr. Esters, everyone on the call, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you all so very much. Dr. Esters, it was a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.